welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Lynette Cruz. I'm your host for this program. Haven't been here for a while, but I'm happy to be back. And today I have a co-host sitting to my right. This is Nanci Munroe.
Aloha.
And our special guest today is Kale Gumapac, whom some of you may know. Certainly you've heard about him. I haven't seen you for a long time.
It's been a while.
And so one of the reasons for having you here is that we need to figure out here, us guys, what's going on, because we don't know what's going on. Nanci, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Nanci Munroe. I actually live on the Big Island as well, and I've been associated with Kale with Laulima title searching claims for a couple of years now. And
so you actually know what the good questions are to ask, because I have to admit, I'm not always sure myself, but I would like to know what the heck is going on. And when you're doing your explaining, perhaps you could start from the beginning of how it is that you have, the spotlight has been shining on you for a while, because we haven't seen you. We need an update. Well, first, we need history.
Sure. Well, the house that is in question now is a home that I bought back in 2000. And then about 2007, 2008, there were issues in regards to the lending institutions and what was going on with loans, not only here in Hawaii, but throughout America.
But Kale, where is this house that you bought?
This is in Puno.
Okay.
Puno in Hawaiian Paradise Park.
on the Big Island.
On the Big Island.
Okay.
And, I love the house. Beautiful place, surroundings, lots of room, and had aquaponics built, raising our own food, chickens, and the whole 9 yards, and close to the ocean, but not right on the ocean. So it was an ideal setting. Plus, it was big enough for me to have our business operation for a Laulima title searching claims. So what happened, when 2007 came along, the bubble burst for the lenders in terms of them lending monies, because up until that time, they were lending monies to everybody and their auntie under the sun, regardless of credit, regardless of their ability to repay and so forth. So what happened was, started to see this huge tidal wave coming from America that was wiping people out with foreclosures throughout America. And the banks here in Hawaii said, it's not going to happen to us because we've used good lending practices, Well, it happened. And so I started to do research to see what we could do in order to help people save their homes. So initially, started this company called Hawaiian Alliance, of which we were using the banking laws regarding securitization. And securitization is where you have, let's say, Bank of Hawaii that loans you money to buy your home. So papers are signed. The moment the papers are signed, Bank of Hawaii immediately puts it in a bundle with other homes to maybe total $10 billion. Then sends it off to Wall Street, and they stamp it AAA grade investments. Okay, so there's homes totaling $10 billion. It goes to Wall Street, and then you have the Wall Street bankers now taking and buying that $10 billion. Then they put it on the stock market, and then they sell it. And this is where the securities of your homes is now put on the stock market. So you have investors from around the world, investors from insurance companies, investors from unions and so forth, all buying investments in this $10 billion portfolio. So in that $10 billion portfolio, there may be 100 investors that buys it all up. So now, the home that you got through Bank of Hawaii, that they resold to the investment bankers on Wall Street, is now owned by 100 investors who have never ever seen your home before.
And the mortgage gets assigned to that, right?
Yes. And the mortgage is a document contract that you sign with the bank, and it automatically transfers over and is taken over by each bank that buys up this loan. So what happened was that they were making loans to everybody, regardless. So it was just a matter of time before these loans would start to backfire, because people were not able to make the payments. And they didn't. So now comes into question who actually owns the contract, and how are they going to be able to foreclose on the house? Because you have 100 investors that bought into this $10 billion package, and all 100 investors actually own 1/100th of your home. So under banking laws, in order for the banks to foreclose on your home, they're supposed to provide the original contracts, okay, and the original title to the property to show that they own the property and they have the rights to now foreclose on your house. Well, that didn't happen because everything was being done electronically, and they had a computer system that controlled everything, which was called the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, MERS. Okay. And so this computer was the one that was making the determination as to whether or not to foreclose on people's homes.
And making a determination about whether or not the documents in practice would be sufficient,
No.
not original.
No,
No?
that
Okay.
was another problem.
Okay.
That was another problem, because it was a computer that was making the decisions to foreclose, and the Wall Street bankers put together this electronic computer system so that everything would run through this computer system. And so it started foreclosing on millions and millions and millions of homes across America. And it started to move to Hawaii. So the basic question in order for a bank to foreclose on your home is you raise a question and you say, you have to produce the original title to the property, and to show that you have the rights to foreclose on my house. Because the title to the property is actually held in the homeowner's name. Okay, so the homeowner has got the title. The bank, all they have is the mortgage, which is the collateral to that home. And so what they're doing is that they're enforcing that collateral in order to take away that title from it. But they also have the originals that was signed at closing. And that's what, by law, they're supposed to produce that when they foreclose. They couldn't.
So is that what Hawaiian Alliance was trying to do?
Yes.
Was show that there was
Yes.
some kind of fault with this foreclosure process?
Yes, because they were rolling over this stuff so much, millions and millions and millions of homes were rolling over. It was impossible for the paper trail to follow it. And so a lot of the titles and everything that got notarized got lost. And so all there was an electronic scan of the thing. But the law says you have to have the originals. You have to have the original documents. Banks couldn't produce that. Okay. So we started a company that helped people with that using these arguments, right? And when we brought it to Hawaii and brought it to first judges, and this was in Hilo, They had never heard of this stuff before, the arguments that we were using, because the cat hadn't been let out of the bag in regards to MERS. And the judges were caught with their pants down. They didn't know what we were talking about. And they were ready to throw the whole case out because they didn't know. But we provided them documents and evidence of all this stuff. Well, and we also caught the bank's attorneys off guard, caught them with their pants down. Well, they surrounded the wagons, as the banks do, because they got the money. And they said, what just happened? And then they took a look at all of the arguments, and they started to break it down. Okay. In the meantime, the arguments were still legally sound. We were still able to hold the banks off from foreclosing on people's homes. But they started to find weaknesses in our arguments. Okay. And worse yet, the judges were not going to allow us to present these arguments. And so the attorneys that we were using at that time, they threatened to sanction the attorneys for even bringing this up. And these were banking laws now, U.S. laws that we were presenting in these U.S. courts. And the judges now were threatening to sanction the attorneys that we were using for even bringing that stuff up.
Did you have any success in any of the court cases using the Hawaiian Alliance arguments?
No, and that's what was that's what was so frustrating, because everything that we had was according to the law, and the judges, because they were never ever familiar with this stuff, nor did they ever want to hear it. The only question that they would ask clients that went to court is that, do you owe this money? And if he said yes, then we rule in the favor of the bank, regardless of, what your arguments were. So we continue with this, believing that the courts are just, and that by providing this evidence, we would finally win with the courts, looking at the law, measuring the evidence provided, and we would win. That never happened.
What you were saying actually is that you were going to play by the rules.
Yes.
But it didn't work because no one really wanted to recognize those
That's right.
rules. Okay.
That's right. And it was very, very, very frustrating.
So Hawaiian Alliance eventually morphed into another entity, which was La Lima Title
Correct.
Searching Claims. So
Correct.
how did that evolve?
And
Well-
why?
Yeah.
Well, I still held the position that our arguments were just rock solid. And eventually we would puka through, and the judges and the banks would finally agree that we were correct. Well, in the meantime, I was a alakai for a group on the Big Island called the KANAKA Council. And the responsibility for the KANAKA Council was to protect our resources from Mauka to Makai. And we got into a litigation with the LNR regarding a fish farm that they were going to approve off the Kohala coast. This was a massive fish farm. And so I went to the hearing that they held here in Honolulu, and the board of directors approved that fish farm. And to all of our objections all over the Big Island, from Kohala all the way down to Kona and even in Hilo, we were objecting. And they still went ahead and approved it. And these guys that were starting this fish farm were, they were money guys from America. And their vision of Hawaii at that time was to have fish farms throughout all of Hawaii, to turn it into the Silicon Valley, like how they did in California, but this would be the fish farms throughout Hawaii. And when you learn more and more about fish farms, it's terrible. So anyway, I filed a contested case. And after I filed a contested case, needed to find someone to help us legally. So turned to all my friends on the Big Island, and some of them had won some major Supreme Court cases and so forth. So went to them for help, and it just didn't fit. But this guy's name kept coming up all the time, and nobody knew really who he was. They knew who he was, but nobody had really met him or knew him personally. And this was Dr. Kealoha. And everybody said, oh, they think that he had just gotten his PhD, and there were rumors flying all over the place. So his name came up so often that I finally went on the internet and investigated. And when I did, I read his dissertation, and this was almost 300 pages, and I sat down and read it that entire night, and I was just blown away. I said, I gotta meet this guy. Never knew him. And so it just happened that he was going to be in a forum at UH the following weekend. So I jumped on the plane and flew to Honolulu. And as I was coming out of the parking lot up by the Hawaiian Studies Department, who should be walking on the sidewalk was Keanu. And so I ran up to him and introduced myself. And I asked him if he could help us with this case as I walked with him to the forum. And before we got there, he said, sure. You know, he had just completed his PhD, and he said, yeah, it's time for me to now come out. You know, and so we got together, you know, in putting together the legal argument on the fish farm. And then during this process, I was talking to some of the clients on the phone and about their foreclosures and so forth, and he overheard me. And then after I hung up the phone, he turned to me and he said, you know, Kale, that every title in Hawaii is defective. And I went, what? He said, yeah. He said, every title in Hawaii is defective. I said, nah. He said, yeah. I said, well, show me. So he sat down and he started to educate me on this stuff, not knowing about his company that he had previously, which was Perfect Title, and that he was the main guy. And I didn't know anything about that company, what they did. When we got done, I knew that we needed to switch gears. You know, that this was the argument that all of my existing Hawaiian Alliance clients need to take, and all new clients coming in, we needed to take it. So that's when I switched companies and changed the name to Laulima Title Search and Claims. Okay, so when he showed me all of that, then I said, then my house got a defect in title. He said, yeah. Then I said, okay, then what do I do? Let's do it. And put me through the paces. Because I couldn't do any of this for anybody, any client, anybody walking in and say, oh, I can do this, when I haven't even done it myself. So I wanted to, you know, test it on myself first, see if it worked. And I did. And this was 5 years ago. And, you know, so we submitted all the information to the bank to notify them that there is a defect in title, and we provided them Keanu's expert opinion, and I stopped making payments on my my note on the house, because if I continued making the payment, there would be no reason for the bank to file a title insurance claim, because there is no loss when you look at the insurance site.
Now, what does a defect in title really mean on your property? So if you've got a defect in title, but yet you've got a deed and you purchased the house, What does that mean for the homeowner if they have a defect and they've got a loan and you're making this title insurance claim?
Well, what happens is that before you can get a loan, the escrow company has got to do a title search. And the title search is one to make sure that there's no break in the chain of titles from one owner to the next. And they're also responsible to look for any defects in the title itself, because you can't get a loan if there is a defect in the title.
What might constitute a defect?
Um,
From like lease to fee simple or something like that?
No. In the title insurance policies, there's a list of what is considered defects in the title. And on that list, one of the defects is a notary. That whoever the notary is has got to be a valid notary. Okay. And another defect says that whoever is in control of the title itself has, that office or department has got to be legitimate. Okay. There's a whole list. There's fraud and many other things that's listed. Okay. So the defect in title, once you're able to show that, according to your title insurance policy and your mortgage contract, you're supposed to notify the bank, give them notice, and that notice can be by way of first-class mail. It doesn't have to be certified. Then the second thing that you have is that in that contract, it also says that all litigation and legal attempts to go after has got to cease until this is remedied. Okay, so we're going by the contract on all of this. So when I talked with Keanu, I told Keanu that, okay, I'm going to stop making my payment so that we can get the bank to file a claim with the title insurance company, because I had Keanu's expert opinion on the defects. So we've provided it to the bank. Didn't hear a response from the bank at all. And the only response that I got from the bank was from an attorney saying they were going to foreclose on my house because I hadn't made the payments. I have the capability to make the payments. But again, if you continue making the payments, the bank is not going to file a claim.
And why would you continue making payments if you have a problem with your title? If you know that your title has some kind of cloud on it, then...
And that was the other reason why I stopped making the payments, because I knew that there was a cloud in the title, that the title was defective.
What's even worse is that you actually attempted to contact them and have dialogue on that, and
Yes.
everyone ignored you. Okay.
Yes, and the banks absolutely turned a deaf ear to it. And it was amazing. And all I said was, I'm just following the contract, what you guys have signed, because when we went to closing, I signed this, you signed this, and this is what the contract is saying. Okay. So when we finally go to court, it was a non-judicial foreclosure, which means that unbeknownst to me, when we went into closing, I agreed to a non-judicial foreclosure, not knowing what that was. Okay, and what that is that's an expeditious way to foreclose on your house if you don't make any payments. Okay, so that they can avoid having to go through the regular judicial process in filing the papers and so forth, because it takes a lot longer. And basically what it says is that if I miss 3 payments, the bank has a right to put a notice up on my house and then advertise it to foreclose.
Now, what were the defects that you had on the property that you notified the bank of?
Well, the defects, and I touched on this, was that the notary that notarized the title was invalid.
Why was the notary?
Because it was a state of Hawaii notary. And with the information that was provided, because of the unlawful and illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, you had the insurgents taking over all of the departments throughout the kingdom, including the Bureau of Conveyances. Plus, they are now in control of all the notaries, of which the department, Bureau of Conveyance, and the notaries had to be Hawaiian Kingdom subjects and in control. Okay. Well, you had this puppet government that's in control now. And during that time period from 1893 to 1898, there was a lot of land that was taken away and switched because they had control of the Bureau of Conveyance and they were the notaries. So there was a lot of broken titles during that time period, and it's still on file at the Bureau of Conveyances. Okay. So you have those two things, the office of which it holds the title and the notary. Those two things are the ones that creates a defect, and enough so that it triggers a claim with the title insurance company, and the title insurance company pays off the remaining amount of the debt. Okay, and that way, or the bank can try to move to quiet title the property, but it's such a long process that they don't want to mess with that. Okay. So the bank, and the bank was Deutsche Bank, ignored all of our information and claims that we made. And I even took them to court, to federal court, and this was in California. We couldn't do it here because the courts do not have jurisdiction in the Hawaiian Kingdom. So we had to file in federal court in California so that the feds would force Deutsche Bank to at least file the claim, and we can move with this process. Well, the federal court ruled against me in California, and they said, well, we can't force Deutsche Bank to file a claim because you're an uninterested third party. The title insurance claim, although I paid the premium at closing, the insured is the bank. So the Fed said, I don't have any interest in this thing. So therefore, I lose. Deutsche Bank won. And Deutsche Bank, their attorney submitted briefs to against what I was proposing. Okay. Then in the non-judicial foreclosure, we went to district court. And this is Judge Harry Freitas' court. And we raised the issue that there was an issue with title. He agreed. And so we won that preliminary case. And so he said, get it out of my court. It doesn't belong in here. So the attorneys for the bank refiled and took it to circuit court. So we went up the next step. And this was before Judge Nakamura. And by that time, several cases had gone through of which the courts were not recognizing any of the title issues that we were presenting. They were ignoring it, and they were ruling against our clients. And when that all happened, a decision was made with Dr. Sai and my attorney Dexter Kayama to use the argument of subject matter jurisdiction, that the courts did not have jurisdiction in this matter because they were U.S. courts trying to adjudicate U.S. laws in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that set a whole new firestorm out. Okay. And long story short, Nakamura refused to hear any of those arguments, but we submitted it in the briefs that we provided, and thus it was on the record. So each step of the way, we're providing a paper trail, because we're trying to get the bank to do the right thing, file the claim. We're trying to get the courts to do the right thing, to get the banks to file the claim. And we're also telling the courts, do not make any rulings on this, because you're a U.S. court, and this is the Hawaiian Kingdom. So Nakamura says, I have the power, regardless of the overwhelming evidence that we submitted. The evidence, I mean, hands down, we win. Okay. And Nakamura, his attitude is that I'm the judge, I have the power, regardless of how lopsided the evidence is. You lose, we're evicting you from your house. Okay. And so November of 2013, the sheriffs show up at my house to evict me, and I think they had 10 or 15 of them show up for the eviction. Came in a van and some cars, and I mean, fully loaded. And so luckily, Nanci was there with the video camera, and Keanu had spent the night at my house because we did a presentation in Puna.
All an accident, right?
Accidentally.
Very coincidental, yeah. And
So the sheriffs come on, and you know, again, I told them that what they're doing is unlawful. Then I wanted to talk to all the deputies that were there, because I know that the deputies had not been informed. And I needed to inform the deputies that if they move forward with this to evict me, that is a war crime that they're going to be committing.
now, you had already advised Lieutenant Patrick Kavai of this when he came in August,
Correct. Yeah.
to let you know he was going to be back to enforce the eviction.
Yeah, because he had come to notify me that he was going to evict me, but this was in August, and it took him 3 months to finally get to evicting me. And when he did show up, I wanted to re-inform him about him committing the war crimes as well as all the other deputies. And then Keanu comes walking out. Their faces just dropped when they saw Keanu walking out. They went, oh, you know.
Not when they saw you with your camera.
No, that was no big deal.
Okay.
But yeah, when they saw Keanu was there at the house on that day, which happened to be a Thursday, sheriffs on the Big Island anyway usually don't do evictions during the weekdays because there's not enough of them to be able to afford that. Usually it's on a weekend, and this was on a Thursday.
And they flew in a special
Fugitive
task force from Honolulu.
Is
to
that
do
for
my
you?
eviction.
Yes.
Yes,
On a Thursday.
for me. And so they kept on saying, you know, am I going to leave the house? And I kept on repeating to them that they are unlawfully enforcing an unlawful court order. Okay. And they kept asking me if I'm going to leave. And I said, you're enforcing an unlawful order. I didn't tell them no. All I told them was that you're enforcing an unlawful order, and we're getting this all in videotape. Okay. And so they arrested me and took me to booking down in the Hilo jail cell and so forth. But by doing that, they committed another war crime with incarceration of a Hawaiian Kingdom subject, which is a war crime. Then they brought in a moving company to move all of my stuff out of the house which is a third war crime that they committed, which is pillaging. Okay, so they're just racking up. You know, it's kind of like the bill that they're going to have to pay down the road, and the bill is almost due now. Okay, so I end up in jail, and then Nanci and Junior Kili'iho'omalo come to bail me out.
What was the charge that they put you in jail for?
The charge was for criminal trespass 2, which is a petty misdemeanor. Okay.
Trespassing on that property?
On
Your
my own,
house, yeah.
on
Yeah.
my own property. But they said I was trespassing on their property. I said, no, it's my property. It can't be your property because of the unlawful order. Okay. So they set a trial date for me, and it's supposed to be, I think it was in March. And a week before we are supposed to go to court, my attorney Dexter gets a call from the prosecutor. The prosecutor says that he's going to be sending him something. So he receives it, and I don't know if it's a Greek or Roman term, Latin term, noli prosecute, which means that refusal to prosecute. And basically the prosecutor threw the case out, okay, that they weren't going to prosecute. When that happened, then I said, oh, that means that I didn't trespass on my property. So I can go back to my property and take it back. So I did. The house was empty, you know, nobody was living in there, so we went in there and took the house back and moved all my stuff back in and was setting up, and then a realtor shows up, you know, when I wasn't home, and so my neighbors across the way called me and they said, hey, somebody's trying to break into your house. So I rushed back to the house, and we catch the realtor trying to break in with a locksmith and this guy that he supposedly sold the house to from Oregon. And so I tell them that everything that they are doing is against the law, and they're committing war crimes. And that if they have any more questions, you know, you have to go read da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so they take off. And then about a week later, I have 8 police officers show up at my house. 3 sergeants and 5 patrol officers. And this was in the afternoon, about 4 or 5 o'clock, with the realtor. And so they come, and I walk out with the judge's order that refusal to prosecute from the prosecutor's sign. Plus, by that time, I also have a letter from the bank, Deutsche Bank, that is because attorney generals, states attorney generals from several states across America, including Hawaii, have settled with Deutsche Bank for fraudulent foreclosure. Okay, so they have a settlement letter that they sent to me. So I have that in my possession. And so I show this to the police officers.
Wait, settlement letter means what?
Well, that Deutsche
You get to
Bank,
keep your property.
well,
No.
Deutsche Bank wanted to pay me money because they unlawfully foreclosed on my property.
Okay.
They didn't know that the property was vacant and that I had moved back. It was a settlement letter for this $6 or $8 billion settlement that they had made for homes across America. Okay, so that was a settlement letter showing that, hey, they foreclosed illegally on my house. And so in the meantime, I had already talked to a friend of mine who's a police officer, explained all this stuff to him, and he says, you know, just tell the police officers that this is a civil matter and this is not a criminal matter. So I had all that information that I presented to the 3 sergeants. And after they looked at everything, verified the documents, they turned around and said, there's nothing we can do about it. And so they left. And the realtor was pissed off. Okay. And so about a week later, 3 more officers show up at my house, and this time it was about 9:30 at night. 1 sergeant and 2 patrol officers. And so I told them, I said, you know, I just talked to 8 officers last week, and I showed them the documents. And told them that if they moved to arrest me, that they're committing a war crime. So the sergeant was real taran. He said, well, you know, who's going to come and, you know, arrest us? You know, who's going to enforce that? No. I said, that's not the point. And so as I was talking to them and explaining it to them, you know, their taran started to be let down and so forth. And then we started talking. And as they read the documents and they were finished with it, the sergeant said, there's nothing we can do about this. You know, and because I gave him the court order that threw out my arrest. I gave them Deutsche Bank's settlement, and I also informed them that this is not a criminal matter but a civil matter. And so they turned around and left. And while outside on the road, the realtor was waiting and approached the sergeant and said, how come they're not arresting me? So the sergeant says, I'm not going to stick my neck out on this one, because he didn't want to get charged with war crimes. Okay, so realtor was upset, takes off again. So the very next morning at about 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 more police officers show up at my house. This time it's 2 rookies. Okay, so I explained the same thing to them, and they have a look of, oh no, what are we going to do now? You know, because they don't know what to do. So they call back to the police station, speak to the desk sergeant. Desk sergeant calls the prosecutor. Prosecutor tells them to arrest me. And so I got arrested for the 2nd time.
Now, wasn't this a little bit different, though, because the realtor had a couple there that supposedly had a lease on that place?
No, it was afterwards.
Oh.
It was afterwards, after they got me out. Okay, and so I got arrested, and but this time the charge was criminal trespass 1, and this is a misdemeanor, which now carries jail time, and so up to 1 year in jail. That if I lose this case, that's where I'm going to go. And so that all happened, and I got out of jail that morning because Nanci came down and bailed me out. And so we've gone to court since then, and I retained Dexter, who is a civil attorney, and I also retained Gary Zamber, who is a criminal attorney. And both of them have used the subject matter jurisdiction arguments in their cases. And in the courts, we went in the district court and before Judge Freitas, and he knows me real well.
By now, yes.
And because it's a jailable offense, I have the right to either pick a jury trial or to have the judge make the decision. Well, I picked a jury trial, and so Judge Freitas cannot do that. And so he immediately kicked it out to go up to the next higher court, which is circuit court. And I know he was really happy about it, kicking that out.
Not having to face you and Dexter.
They did not want to have this stuff in his court. And so it went into Judge Glenn Harris' court, circuit court judge.
When was that? Was that last year, 2014?
No, it was
13?
just,
About 3 weeks ago.
2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh, very
Yeah.
recent, okay.
Yeah. And so in Horace Court, he was surprised when I showed up with the 2 attorneys and that we showed up, period. The look was classic.
Why would he be surprised?
It
It was scheduled. You were expected, weren't you?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
scheduled, I was expected, but I think the fact that we're bringing in subject matter jurisdiction, plus the fact that Judge Freitas had told people about him being summoned for a war crime.
Yes.
And in addition to that, we believe that all the other judges have also been summoned for war crimes. This is now starting to really complicate and, I believe, scare the heck out of them.
You want to briefly explain again what subject matter jurisdiction is?
Sure. Subject matter jurisdiction is an argument in court that can be brought up at any time, regardless of how far along the trial is. And this basically is saying that that judge or that court has no jurisdiction over this case. Okay? And so you have to provide evidence and so forth. And what we've done with the subject matter jurisdiction is shown that because of the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom and the continued existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign independent country, during an occupation which we are in, it should be an Article II court, which is a military court that adjudicates Hawaiian Kingdom constitutional law. And it's not an Article III court that they're using. Okay. And so as a result of that, these judges were providing them all this information, and they're supposed to either dismiss it or recuse themselves from the bench, one or the other. They haven't done it.
But they
And-
do know what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And we're providing all the evidence. We make sure we provide the paper trail, because what we're doing is that we don't want them to say, oh, they didn't know. So that when they get hit and charged with war crimes, that we have the evidence that said, we informed you, and you continued to move forward with what you were doing and broke the law and committed the war crime.
Now, why exactly did you want a jury trial and not a trial by the judge?
We know that that the judges will always rule against us.
In favor of the banks?
In favor of the banks, and knowing that if they rule in our favor, because we have provided the evidence that Hawaii is illegally occupied, and that the state of Hawaii cannot exist, as well as these courts. Just like what Hara said in a previous trial. He said this is like an atomic bomb to the state of Hawaii. He's making a decision not based on legal law. He's making a decision based on politics.
And on impacts.
That's right.
Basically,
Yes.
he knows what
Yeah.
will happen, like most people know what will happen. So at the expense of law enforcement, or just
Doing the right thing?
doing the right thing, it's really about something else.
Well, they're
Yeah.
trying to protect the existence of the
Right.
state of Hawaii and the existence of the federal government
Here,
here.
yes.
Okay, because if they rule in our favor, which they're supposed to,
But they
because the
can't.
evidence
Yeah.
is overwhelming, they have stepped outside
Mm.
of the law and said, because I am judge and because I have the power, I can do this, regardless of what the law says.
And the evidence that you have.
That's right. You know, and so by doing that, not only have they stepped way out of bounds, but they committed war crimes of which it's now in the international level, of which we believe that they will eventually get extradited and be put on trial.
Where do you live now?
Well,
I'm just gonna, only because our time
Sure.
is running short, so where are you?
I live in a rental home in HBP, and
Okay.
it's a great place, but I'm still looking forward at getting my home back because of all of the illegal stuff that has gone on, and it's not gonna. We think that it's gonna move very quickly now, especially with what Kealoha has done up in Switzerland, and the Swiss government now is investigating and almost to the point of prosecuting the CEO of Deutsche Bank. And he's retired now, but he was a CEO at the time of my eviction. And he is a Swiss subject, Swiss citizen, and he lives in Switzerland, but he was the head of the largest bank, second or third largest bank in the world, okay, in Germany. And so now the Swiss government is.
That happened to have your mortgage at the.
That's
okay.
right,
Yeah.
Deutsche Bank. And with, there were many times that we provided Deutsche Bank to get out of this thing. All they had to do was just file a claim with the title insurance company. That's all they had to do. And instead, they moved to take us out, take me out. And the reason why they did that is because it will have a huge domino effect in the entire banking industry throughout Hawaii. Okay, one, title insurance companies will no longer want to write title insurance here in Hawaii. And by doing that, the banks will no longer be able to make any real estate loans, whether it's residential or commercial.
I would like to say something like, gee, that's really sad. But the reality is we are living out in our lives today. The implications really point back to something that happened a long time ago. It's not our fault. And so even though people may say, well, if you do this, this is going to happen. But the reality is somebody already did that. And as a result of that, we're here today. Yes, something is going to happen, but don't look at us. We didn't do it.
Yeah, yeah.
We're just playing it out. Yeah.
Well, I've been criticized for wanting to get out of a debt that I owed.
Let's
yes.
stick it on you.
Yes, it's my fault. No, yeah, I owe the debt. I made that commitment to the bank. And so I was paying the bank all the way up until the time I found out that there was a defect in title. And I also paid at closing for the title insurance policy that protected the bank in case there's a defect. And so in my contract, it says all I need to do is notify the bank and provide the evidence. I did that. So I followed all the terms of the contract, and I wasn't trying to get out of anything. I'm just following the contract. And now, you know, this is where I'm at.
Yes. Well, you know, when other people's arguments are weak is when they start attacking your character because there's no information. I mean, there's no other way to defend what they're doing except to say that you're a bad person.
That's right.
And we're all kind of like used to it, right? Not that it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard to refute this information that we're coming out with.
Actually, you want them to, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, and the basic thing is, it always goes back to the original problem is that there is no treaty of annexation.
And that is not, absolutely not our fault. So basically, you're going to have to eat it. That's how I feel. Maybe a lot of people will eat it, but even that is not our fault.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that in order for us to move forward with this, we have to now, take it to them.
And fix that problem.
And yeah, I've been arrested. Yeah, I've had to go to jail. Yeah, I've been evicted from my house. But I'm starting to see the fruits of what we're doing. Because now we have the Swiss government that is looking to prosecute using my case and using a case on Kauai of a Swiss citizen. Did I want to go through this? No, I didn't want to go through any of this stuff. But, for the first time in my whole life, I can really say that I have a country and that I am willing to do whatever it takes for my country. And I'm proud to say that. And I'm willing to step it up and do whatever is necessary and whatever has to be done.
And to sacrifice your home to show that you believe in this.
Yeah, you first.
Because it is irrefutable.
Not someone else.
And you know this is the truth. To sacrifice your home is a huge thing. There's something else to look at, though, that we're not at arms. We're not fighting. This is a battle in the legal system with the courts. So nobody has lost their life.
And what's even better than that is, I think your kupuna are proud of you. For all of us to do this work, there's no money involved. There's no payoff. But there is a call, and all of us are called, I think, to do what is right, and our kupuna will make us do what is right. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and Nanci for being my co-host. And we have had, there's a lot of information out there. I think people will be really happy to watch this particular program. Thank you for joining us, both of you. Last words, you got about 10 seconds.
I'm very proud to be on your show and for the things that you do. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you guys that are watching. And by all means, join us again. If there's any particular topic that you want to hear more about, email me, paulolo@hawaii.rr.com. I'm Lynette Cruz for Issues That Matter. My co-host Nanci, Munroe, and my special guest, Kale Gumapac.
Mahalo.
Wow. What you just shared is like, packed a punch. I got to go home and think about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Mahalo to all of you. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Aloha.
And you cannot handle, and then you wanna shut us up so you start screaming scandal. You say we're fighting for no reason and that we only fail. If intelligence is a crime, then I belong in jail. No more watching the world go by, my friend. Somebody gonna die if I see my tutu cry again.